Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Nina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gaura Bhaktarinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Good morning, everyone, and happy Gaur Purnima. This morning, all of you who are seated here near the sacred fire pit will be taking hari-nāma initiation. And this is an auspicious day for such an occasion, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was eager that people from all over the world would come together and join the Saṅkīrtana movement to spread it all over the world. And also take advantage of the fruit of the chanting of Hare Kṛṣṇa. So all of you have very wisely invested your lives, your hearts, your souls, your minds in the Saṅkīrtana movement and have been chanting Hare Kṛṣṇa. Some of you for several years. And now, by Krishna's arrangement, you're all here. And by your sincere desire to enter deeply within the process of bhakti yoga, devotional service. So congratulations to all of you for being here on Gaur Purnima. Hare Krishna. And we need a little heart. Everyone else who's here, it's your job to pour out as much goodwill, mercy from your hearts as possible. Your presence here makes everything worthwhile. Those of you who have been here, been practicing for many years. So we'll begin this morning by performing Achman, and I'll direct you how to do that. Do it one time, and then we'll chant the Sri Brahma Samhita, and I'll say a few words about the process of initiation, and then we'll have the fire ceremony. So please repeat after me. Om Apavitra Pavitrova Sarvavastan Gatopiva Yasmare Pundarikaksham Sabhaya Apyanjara Shuchihi Shri Vishnu Shri Vishnu Shri Vishnu. Now you see a little water cup there next to you. And take the spoon in your left hand and open up your right palm and put in 3 drops of water, and then sip the water and say, but first say Om Keshvaya Namaha. Now 3 more drops. Om Narayanaya Namaha. And sip the water. And 3 more drops. Om Madhavaya Namaha. And now with that mantra we sang, we find the essence of the practice of Krishna consciousness. which is whatever condition of life we're in now, whether pure or impure. When we remember Krishna, then we become pure, inside and out. And as we move through this material world, inevitably we'll be wading through the modes of nature, most of them on the lower side of rajas and deeply into tamas. Sattva is hard to find here in this world, but if you remember Krishna, Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma puhyaya kalpate. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, if you continue practicing devotional service, then you'll rise above gunatita. You rise above the material modes of material nature and come into Krishna's embrace in the spiritual energy. And that's your intention for this initiation. It's the purpose of taking the vows that you'll take today. And now, as Srila Prabhupada expressed to us in 1975 in Chicago, the temple room was about twice as big as this, and it was full, maybe 1,000 devotees. And there were many initiates. I don't remember the exact number, but it was probably 70 or 80. And then there were 3 sets of Gaura-Nitai deities on the altar, because it was simultaneously an installation for 3 sets of Gaura-Nitai deities that were going on the buses. Because at that time there were many buses driving around, and all those devotees would get initiated and get on the bus with Gaura-Nitai, and then travel town to town. And when we were there, Rohini Kumar Prabhu, who's literally the founder of ISV, had introduced many of the devotees there to the proper chanting of the Sri Brahma Samhita and the Puruṣa Sukta, which he did during the ceremony, and afterwards Prabhupada said he liked it very much. In fact, as Mukaravinda Prabhu revealed to us the other night, he wrote it in his purport that we should have this regularly, the chanting of Puruṣa Sukta. And we know he said Brahma Samhita also. So at least for now, since we just started learning the Puruṣa Sukta, we'll chant the verses from the Brahma Samhita. Does that sound like an okay idea to everybody? Yes. Okay, we'll put it up on the screen so everyone can follow along. So today is called Gora Purnima. The Purnima is indicative of the moon cycle. It's a full moon tonight. And it's also a special day because marked on the calendar, it's the day that one of Krishna's, Krishna being God, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, makes his avatar. And avatāra means one who descends. The idea behind this, as Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita, is that as souls, it's possible for us to sink into a lower type of existence, because God has multifarious energies, but there are generally 2 categories, well 3 actually, including us. One is conscious spiritual energy, which is full of light and knowledge and bliss, and that's what makes up the spiritual world. And then there's what's called his external energy, which is the material world. It's still beautiful, the material world, because it has variety, and it's also the energy of God, but it's certified lower. And Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita how there are elements which are not conscious, like earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. These, he says, are the material, gross and subtle energies. But besides these, he says, there's another energy, which is the souls, which in more precise or modern language. It's consciousness. But it's not an amorphous consciousness that's all one, but it's individualized. Each one of us have a sense of our individuality. That's why we all pick a different color car, or we have various likes and dislikes. We're individuals. And that individuality that we're experiencing now, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, is an eternal truth. We're always individuals. We're individuals, and we existed before we came into this situation that we're in now. Situation meaning we have a particular body, we have a job, perhaps, still. Or maybe we live in a particular neighborhood, we have a family, we consider ourselves, according to our place of birth, to be American or to be British or Indian. And all of these are temporary, but they're our life situation for now. Krishna says that besides this temporary life situation that we're in now, is our eternal occupation, which is to be in the spiritual world, where there's also, well, I shouldn't say also, I should say about this world, there's also variety. Because as described in the Bhagavad Gita, this world is a reflection of the spiritual world. If you have a circle, 360 degrees, half is the reflection and half is reality. And when the soul, which is the third kind of energy, which is called tatastha, which means marginal, we can go anywhere. We can be in the spiritual energy, which is full of bliss and knowledge and eternality, or because of a sense of our eternal sense of independence, we can also venture into the material energy. And in that energy, we can forget our original eternal position as spiritual souls and servants of God. And so when Krishna makes his avatar to this world, his intention is to give a process and the knowledge to follow the process so that the soul can awaken and come back to its original state of being Krishna conscious, conscious of God. There are many statements about this, and in a song by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, which we sang part of earlier this morning, he describes how the soul's sleeping and to its real identity. And that's by hearing the spiritual sounds. For instance, the Hare Kṛṣṇa mantra is a spiritual sound. It's coming from the highest position in the spiritual world. In another song, not the one I'm quoting now, but it says, golokera, prema-dhana, hari-nāma-saṅkīrtana. That the sound of the Hare Kṛṣṇa mantra, a sample of which you can give now. That mantra and the name, which is composed of names of God, is an avatāra also. It comes from the spiritual world into this world. And by hearing that sound, it's very much like the Wizard of Oz. Dorothy got bumped on the head. I think it was a tornado, because she probably lived, where did she live? Kansas, thank you. I got to know my śāstra. She lived in Kansas, where there are tornadoes, and after being bumped on the head, she entered into a dreamland. She was unconscious, apparently, as we find out in the end. But everything seemed real, and there was a wicked witch, and there was a good witch, and there was Tin Man and the lion, Scarecrow. Thank you, everybody. I haven't watched it in a long time. And Robot. And of course there was Oz, and then the dog, Toto. That one I remember. It was a harrowing experience she had there. fluctuating between the good witch and her benevolence and the bad witch who was sinister and scary. For me as a kid, it really scared me thinking about that. And on the journey, she came to know an incantation by which she could come back to her original consciousness. Does anybody remember that, what it was? There's no place like home. I think she had to click her heels also. If anybody wants to correct me, go ahead, because I'm not fully studied on this, but 3 clicks of the heels, there's no place like home. There's no place like home. And by that mantra and clicking her heels, she came back into her home in Kansas. And everyone was worried about her. All her loved ones were there. And that was the reality that she came back to after that harrowing journey she had through the land of Oz. And there's a way in which the Bhagavatam describes how we're sleeping, or the song I'm talking about is we're sleeping, and we're having these dreams about our lives, our life situation. Sometimes it's very scary, and there's a way in which we sometimes feel we've come into good fortune, and we feel elated, but then we lose that fortune, whatever it might have been, due to circumstances, which people can probably relate to. And it comes and goes, and then there is a sound that comes and a mantra that comes from the spiritual world. And the avatar who brings that to teach it to everybody, the Hare Kṛṣṇa mantra, is a sound of home. You can hear your spiritual home first. You hear it. Or you can hear God first also, because he appears in sound. It's the philosophy behind the Krishna consciousness movement and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teaching, that the mantra itself is an avatar, and by chanting it, we awaken from the dream and we come back to reality. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who's the avatar of Krishna, who appeared on this day, much over 500 years. We've been saving 500 years since I joined the movement, which was 52 years ago. So it must be 552 years or something like that he appeared. And his idea was to go everywhere and give everyone a chance to take this mantra as a non-sectarian process. He taught that the name of God and God himself are non-different. Such ideas have also been prevalent in other theological systems of the world and debated at different points, but unabatedly he taught that this is the main process. And it's also mentioned in the ancient wisdom literatures that when one chants the name of God, then one is directly in contact. For instance, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said that the easiest way to contact God or Krishna is to chant his name. Because by chanting the name, then you're directly in the presence of God. Of course, we may not realize that at first because we're distracted. And we may be thinking of other things, so we're not tuned in. So initiation means that we're getting tuned in. Because there's a way in which, if I went to one of the universities in the area, let me pick one, UC Berkeley. And I walked into one of the labs where the students are looking at some kind of hormone or something. What do you look at in your telescope in Berkeley? Microscope. Thanks, you're cool. I wouldn't know what I was looking at, nor do I even know what I'm talking about right now, but that's case in point that although we may have a process, until we're studied in it, until we begin to specialize in it and become serious about it, it doesn't penetrate. So initiation means that it's penetrated. We've felt the power of chanting Hare Kṛṣṇa, and also the benefits of living a life free of encumbrances. There are major encumbrances in this life that I see present in every duty-free shop of the world. They're all the same, everywhere. We've recently been in Hong Kong, we were in Singapore, been in London, been in Bombay, Delhi, any others? All the same duty-free shop. They have whiskey, cigarettes, they have chocolate. We won't go there because perfume. There are ways in which there are many ideas in this world about how one might be happy and enjoy. The idea of dangling a cigarette from one's mouth has been around for a long time in movies. Somebody thinks it looks cool. And there are other kinds of vices in this world that are just that. They're vices. They're not necessary, and they distract us from clear consciousness. And so along with the chanting of Hare Kṛṣṇa, there's a way in which in the initiation ceremony, each one of the initiates makes a vow that makes the whole earth, not just the earth, but the universe rumble. You'll feel it when each of you come up here and you make your vows. You'll feel a rumbling in the universe. Because these vows are so unusual compared to the status quo of the duty-free and any downtown in any place in the world where whether you're in Morocco or you're in Minneapolis, you're going to find the same shops up and down the street. Be a lot of restaurants. And there's going to be some clothing shops so you can buy yourself a nice new hat while you're there. And maybe a suitcase and a few knickknacks and doodads. But you're not going to find a place where self-realization is prevalent or the holy name is offered. There's a verisimilitude of these things. In fact, I remember, although it's closed now, ironically, the cosmetics store that we used to walk past in going to chant Hare Kṛṣṇa in downtown Palo Alto was called Infinite Beauty. And every time I walked by there, they offered me a little free sample that said Infinite Beauty on it. It was a cream, and obviously I didn't use it. Unfortunately, I lost my packet. And then I noticed that the store is closed, which I found ironic because the implication behind the idea of infinite beauty is they'll be there forever, and if you take this, you'll be beautiful forever. Where did that idea come from? If you find gold in the desert, which is otherwise barren, you might ask, who's been here? Who left this here? How did it get here? And similarly, in this world where we don't find infinite beauty, although we certainly search for it, where did the idea come from that there's infinite beauty? It comes from the spiritual world of which we're a part. And when we're able to clear the brush, moving out to each side the unnecessary practices in our lives which are foolish. For instance, don't drink anything that you could ignite. And the lungs have a hard enough time as it is nowadays, filtering out everything, so don't blow anything extra in there, etc., etc. All of these unwanted things are something that one can declare loudly to the universe during initiation and say, that's it, I'm opting out. I'm out of that. And one can stay integrated in the world and be at one's job or with friends and so forth, but everyone will know, oh yeah, this person is not interested in these distractions. And that causes a ruckus in and of itself. At first, people often say, oh, ho, ho, why are you doing that? And then after a few days, and he's like, well, how do you do that? And after, like, oh, maybe I could do it too. People look for ways in which they can rise above the various habits of the world that seem to hold them back from expanding their own potential. And so along with this very direct process of connecting with God, the initiates also take vows so that it's on the record, so that wherever they go, they don't have to involve themselves in the great distractions of life. And they can go on with their practice, which they will vow to do every day. So those are the two simple processes, although it's not ordinary. Most people think about taking steps towards improving themselves drastically, but it's very rare that anybody takes such steps and makes a vow to do them throughout their whole life. And oftentimes when people are near the end of their lives, they think back to all the opportunities they've had that I wish I had done more to improve myself spiritually, but I was caught up in all the distractions of life. So you don't have to do that because you've taken a path which is extraordinary. It's beyond the ordinary path of the material world. And it's a clarion call that you've heard because you've read the Bhagavad Gita and you've read the Srimad Bhagavatam, and it has spoken to you. And you're chanting Hare Kṛṣṇa. And in the chanting of Hare Kṛṣṇa, you feel improved. Otherwise, and I know this from talking to all of you and observing all of you, and that's why you're here today, right? Say yes. Yes. And if you came in the wrong room and actually saying, you could stay. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of the myriad avatars of God, and God has myriad avatars. He comes in different moods and at different times to show himself to the world and to give teachings according to the time, place, and circumstance. In the teachings of the Srimad Bhagavatam, we're in a particular age now called Kali. And at this period, because it's an onerous time for people to live and try to exist and just to stay alive for most people, for 98% of the population, it's difficult just to maintain a family and have enough food to eat. And it's also a time when there's a lot of confusion. It's a time when there's a lot of distraction, there's a lot of quarrel. This is according to the Srimad Bhagavatam. So in this age, there's a simple path for self-realization, and it's described as the chanting of the holy names of God. So one of the prescriptions given in our line of the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya is to daily chant, to count how much you're chanting so you don't cheat yourself and start doing fewer than you said you signed up for. And a prescription, someone may say, well, why 16 rounds? Well, there's a way in which when you go to a doctor, the doctor may tell you, you take 2 of these or 3 of these. I generally don't ask why. If I know that the doctor is certified, and if I go to some place and ask, where did you do your education? They said, I took a YouTube course. And don't worry, it's cool, because my brother also taught me a lot. You might question, what are you giving me anyway? But if you go to a doctor who's been through the rigors of medical school and has the diploma on his or her wall, and they're working for a main, I don't know if this example will resonate with everybody, because there's a lot of animus towards the medical profession nowadays. But I'm giving a crude example. And that is when you go, you don't necessarily ask, why do I take 2? Why not 3? Or you don't speculate and say, well, maybe I'll take twice as much or half as much. You consult the doctor, and if you don't think that you got a good diagnosis and a good prescription, then you can always get a second opinion. And taking initiation means you've done your due diligence. It means that you've found that the idea of axiomatic truth is sound because it's necessary in any discipline or any philosophical system. You have to have a place where you say, okay, I trust the source. And then after that, when you get a prescription and the medicine, then the point is you have to take it. Get one of those little boxes that make sure that it has Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then you put them all in ahead of time, and then you make sure you take them every day. And if you notice that you forgot to take one on Monday, and it's already Wednesday, you go back and you make sure. Well, medicine, I don't know. But with the chanting, it's measured in that way so you don't miss the prescription. And it's very similar. If you don't like 16 rounds as a prescription, you can always go and try to get a second opinion. And maybe some other doctor, spiritual doctor, will say, oh, just chant in your mind or chant 4. But we very specifically trust our doctor, especially because of his example. Srila Prabhupada, who we have prominently sitting on this seat called the Vaiśeṣika, which is a seat prevalent in any one of the institutions that bring this teaching of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to show that there is an authority present who brought the message down through what's called disciplic succession, that there is a line of doctors who are all certified, and each one of them have considered the dosage very carefully and then prescribed it. And so we have that prescription, and that's the mood in which we take 16 rounds a day. And some have had asked Prabhupada, well, why only 16 rounds? And he said, well, you can also chant 16,000 rounds if you have the taste for it and the time. But the minimum is 16 rounds a day. And that's important because with any kind of medicine, you would like to know what the minimum is for you to gradually have the good effects of the medicine. So that's the number, 16. And of course, you can chant more if you wish at different intervals, but it's good to stay steady at 16 rounds. So 16 rounds, 4 regulative principles, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, in his childhood, he was a great scholar, noted for his intelligence, so much so that the elder scholars who would, at that time in history, come around and challenge everybody to debate. It was an active sport. That was the main sport of the time. And he defeated them all, even as a young boy. And he became a hero and heroic in knowledge. After he was established in that way as a great intellectual, he had gone to Gaya to perform a last rites ceremony for his father who passed. And while he was there, he met his guru, Srila Ishvara Puri. And after meeting his guru and taking the same vows that you'll take today to chant Hare Kṛṣṇa, he came back to his hometown in Navadvip, and people didn't recognize him anymore. He was completely different. And when he came back to his job, he had taken a hiatus from his job to go to Gaya, but he came back, he had a job. You know what it was? He was a teacher. The students were alarmed because then he began teaching, as he was teaching grammar at the time, in Sanskrit grammar. It's a little complicated. It takes some concentration and a long time to learn because it's a very precise language. started saying about grammar, specifically dhatu, when the students ask him. Dhatu means the irreducible part of a word that is in its root form. And verbs in Sanskrit get conjugated and nouns get declined. And there's a way in which that all occurs from the root word. And so he said, dhatu, that means Krishna, because everything comes from Krishna. And he said, just like there are energies that come from, just as there are meanings that morph from every dhatu in Sanskrit, so he said, every one of the nuances in this world, it comes from Krishna. And when the students would ask him simple questions about grammar, he said, everything means Krishna. So they went to his teacher and said, we don't know what he's teaching us. So his teacher called Nimai to come to his office, and he said, hey, what are you teaching? Teach it the correct way. And he said, you're the best teacher anywhere. And he replied, did Nimai, that bring any scholar here and let them debate me, and I will defeat them in the open marketplace. And then he left. Meanwhile, the students became so attached to him that they didn't want to leave him, although they were bewildered by his style of teaching. But everyone had been astounded by the change in him. He did then travel as a sannyasi after he took sannyas later, and coming to an important and relatable aspect of this Leela of Lord Chaitanya's. After he had gone to Vrindavan, he was just leaving town with 4 associates, and as he often did, he fainted in ecstasy when chanting Hare Kṛṣṇa. At that time, students were gathered around him trying to revive him, and some soldiers came up on horses, and they accused his associates of drugging him and trying to steal his valuables, which is interesting because Mahaprabhu at that time was a sannyasi. And so he then woke up from his trance. He yelled out 2 words. You know what they were? Haribol. Go ahead. Haribol. Yeah. And then he started conversing with the soldiers. And they were patans. They had, one of them was deeply religious and wore a black gown. And there were several more that were more intimidating. But one of them, upon seeing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, became soft-hearted and wanted to hear from him. And there on the hillside, Mahaprabhu began speaking to them about the Quran and conversing about its meaning, and said that the ultimate purpose is to develop love for God, and that there is a personal God. There are many details in his teachings, but the result of his standing there on the hilltop and talking to these Patan soldiers was that one of them, first of all, the very religious one, wanted to become a student of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so he submitted himself and he said, how may I become your follower, your disciple? And then there was one more who was named Bajuli Khan. And he was a young man. He was the son of the king, a prince. And he had just been traveling with these soldiers. And he said, me too. I'm also interested. They were attracted to Mahaprabhu and what he said, and they were convinced. And so there on the hillside, Mahaprabhu had given the name Ramdas to the very religious person with the black gown on. And doesn't say what name he gave to Bajuli Khan. But the purport indicates that he had initiated him there on the hillside. And then Prabhupada says a couple things. One is, It's the system when you take initiation that you accept a new name. Would you like to know what your names are? For the men, Das, and the women, Dāsi. So, yeah, that's good. I could just tell you a personal anecdote. When I was eager to find a spiritual path and had been really searching and praying, I first got back to Godhead magazine, and I was reading through and noticing that the students were all either called Das or Dāsi, and I was thinking, how do you get one of those? I want one of those. And so it's the most exalted of names. If you can get a name Das or Dāsi, it means that you're an insider in Krishna's family because you've committed yourself to a life of service. And as Bhaktivinoda Thakur says in one of his songs, Jeev Krishna Das, e Bishwas, Korleto Ardukonai, when you develop this conviction, this Bishwas, that I'm better off serving Krishna than serving myself, he said, for you, no more misery. All the attachments we have in this world, they cause us so much anxiety. And there's a way in which, when we're attached to things in this world, which is completely natural to be attached, we try to hold on to them, but we can't. For instance, money. It's really hard to hold on to. Have you noticed that? It comes and goes. You think you're rich and then you're poor, or you think, whatever. It's like, what to speak of artifacts. You try to hold on to some valuable book or a painting or something like that, and it'll maybe be in the family for a long time, then suddenly gone. And things come and go in this world. And so the idea of being a Dāsa or Dāsi is that instead of trying to hold on to these for a sense of satisfaction or a perceived idea that now I'm wealthy, because most of that is perceived because I look at nowadays a screen and there's a number at the bottom and I go, okay, that's good, but it's not enough, no matter what the number is. And it gives an idea that, if I need that, it's always there. It'll protect me. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Shukadeva Goswami says, Deha patra kalatra deshu atma sainisa satsapi, tesham pramodanitanam pashyanapi napashyati. He said, this is only perceived wealth. It comes and goes. You can't keep it. So the Dasas and the Dasis know this. So they play a trick on the material world, on the illusory energy. Because the illusory energy is like trick on us, that you'll be happy here in the material world just by trying to get comfy. You're never going to get comfy. I mean, I hate to break it to everybody, spoiler alert, but there is no comfort here in the material world that lasts. It just doesn't exist. So the Das and the Dasi say, okay, I have all these things. I'll be attached to them, but for a different reason, to use them in service. And as long as I can use them in service to God, then they're useful for me. Otherwise, they don't belong to me. They belong to Krishna. And therefore, whether they come or whether they go, that's not my business. And you can calculate how this works, because if you have something and you try to hold on to it for your own satisfaction, and then you inevitably lose it, then you don't get any credit. Yes or yes? There's no credit because you just lost it like everybody else. Like somebody had a house and then it burned down. And you tried to hold on to the house, but you couldn't, so you're like everyone else. But if, when you have something that you know is temporary, but then you use it in service to Krishna, God, then you get eternal credit for it. Which would you like? The eternal credit, or to be like everybody else and lose all your stuff because of an unceremonious swell of material nature that comes and takes it away? Yeah, I thought so. And that's the idea behind becoming a Dāsa or Dāsi, that I'm a servant here in this material world. And fine if I have lots of things, but they're only paraphernalia to be used in Krishna's service. So Manasa deho geho yo kichumor. Lord Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, whatever I have, body, mind, soul, family, car, money, it's all just in the service of God. That's das or dasi. That's what you signed up for, right? It's the only peace of mind. As Krishna Bhakti Nishkam Ataiva Shant, Bhukti Mukti Siddhikami, Sakaliya Shanta. The Chaitanya Charitamrita says, the Krishna Bhakta, the das or the dasi, is the only peaceful person in the world. Because they only look at the world as paraphernalia to be used in Krishna's service. But bhukti, mukti, siddhikami, everybody else who wants something, they want to cut from it. Where's my cut? Once you have that, ashanta, then you're never peaceful. And you never get to keep your cut anyway. Somebody's going to cut in line and take your cut. And then you don't get it. So better just to sign everything off, just like very wealthy people. They don't own anything. That's why they don't pay taxes. They sign everything over. It's like, okay, time to pay taxes. I didn't make any money. Oh, how is that? You live in a royal lifestyle here. It's like, yeah, that's not mine. That belongs to the company. And the company, that's their business. They have their own accounting system. But for me, no. Everything I use, I'm only using in the service of the company. So I don't pay anything. And it's a similar system here of the Dāsa or Dāsi. You opt out of the material world where you get karma for everything you try to keep. Every little thing you put behind your back. It's not that the material nature doesn't account for that. They're much more astute than the IRS. Sorry to bring it up. And so this is a great relief to surrender to Krishna. And the Srimad Bhagavatam says, Devarshi bhutatnam nrinam pitranam nakinkaro nayam rani charajan sarvatmadaya sharanam sharanyam gato mukundam parihritikhartam. This is the same thing that's in the accountant's handbook that teaches people how to opt out of paying taxes. That if you give everything to Mukunda, Krishna, and like, I only use it in Krishna's service, then you're no longer a debtor in the material world. You don't owe debt to any. But if you do have debts, pay them off. Don't think you can walk away from that. It just means that you're not accountable for all that you do because you're doing everything for Krishna. So it doesn't go into your ledger. So each one of you has an individual impetus to be a servant of Lord Chaitanya, and we're going to call each of you up, and you can, if we make a little pathway, just a slight arrangement, so the initiates can go and offer obeisances to Prabhupada and then come here and offer your obeisances here. Then we'll give you a seat. You can sit on the seat, and we'll give you a microphone, and we would like to hear your vows. And so would everybody online. Hare Kṛṣṇa. And then also, we have for each one of you someone who wanted to speak for 1 minute and 59 seconds to give an indication of what is your context here, how did you get here, and so forth. And we'll start by putting your neck beads on. And these neck beads, now we see some devotees coming forward with neck beads to help you out. If you've assigned somebody, see, I'm wearing neck beads. There's 3 strands. When you take to the process of Krishna consciousness, you can wear 1 strand. When you're aspiring for initiation, you can wear 2. And when you're initiated, you wear 3. So that's a sign. If somebody sees you with 3, then they know you're initiated. And if you wear 4 or 5, then you'll confuse everybody. So don't do that. Follow the standard. And also be aware of the fact that wherever you go, you're representing Krishna. You're the representatives in this world, and people know when they see 3 strands. When I got on Swiss Air the other day, we were flying out of Bombay, and as soon as I got on, and I was just walking back to my seat, 2 people saw my neck beads, and they just said, Hare Kṛṣṇa. I got to the next area, Hare Kṛṣṇa. Like, all right, Hare Kṛṣṇa. So the neck beads also are a reminder that I've taken these vows, and it's an esoteric piece of paraphernalia. I hate to call it like that, but it's what it is they're made from tulsi leaves. Tulsi is the expansion of Vrinda Devi, who's one of the intimate associates of Krishna in the spiritual world, and from Vrinda Kund in Vrindavan, which you can visit. She has her disciples who are all parrots. Do you know she has a parrot on her hand? And that parrot there are millions of other parrots. And that's the surveillance system in Vrindavan. They all fly around and they scope out all the best places for Krishna's pastimes in the day. Every morning she charts it out, does Vrinda Devi. And that's one of the spiritual power centers of our Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. I know this is all very, very esoteric, but I had to put some esoteric katha here today. And there's a way in which, when we wear these neck beads, we're remembering that we are aspiring for that very specific realm called Vrindavan. Vrindavana means Vrinda, the forest of Tulsi. And so these are beads made of Tulsi. You got 3? You got 3? Getting there. 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. Yours are already on. 3, 3. How do you feel? Different? Yeah. Okay. We may need super glue in the front row here.